It's the Believe in Texans podcast brought to you by FanDuel. The Texans victorious 20-16 over the Indianapolis Colts as the Texans at the very least control their destiny versus the Colts. The Jaguars still have a one-game lead on them, but the Jaguars have some tough matchups coming up. So this game largely is as much as it was a defensive battle and as much as the defense in holding the Colts to the lowest amount of points the Colts had all season long drove this victory. There were some good things offensively, despite the offense only scoring 20 points. First and foremost, CJ Stroud gets back. He's healthy, throws for 265 yards, 63% completion percentage, 0 touchdowns, 1 interception, one particularly ugly interception. Here's CJ Stroud on how he thought he played on Sunday.
I would say, early on I was a little rusty. I thought, they really didn't give me like big plays, like they were taking a lot of that stuff away. So I thought I was very disciplined, check downs and, getting the ball to where it had to go. And then of course the interception sucked. I got to just take care of the ball and, put Hutch in a better spot and just flatten him out. But other than that, I thought I played really good. I thought, every opportunity I had, with the ball, I thought I, made the right decision. A couple plays I went back. But I thought, I did a really good job of, taking what the defense was giving me. I think the type of team we have, I don't have to be Superman all the time. And, I got to just do my job each and every play. And I'm not going to be perfect. I'm never going to be perfect. And I trust myself. I know my teammates trust me. And that's all that really matters.
It was a rusty start for the offense in general. It wasn't just CJ that looked rusty. The offense in parts of that first half, really up until the first touchdown drive, looked a lot like the offense that we had seen in the first several weeks of the season. The opening drive, 12 plays, settling for a field goal. Dalton Schultz was wide open, but Grover Stewart did a good job of getting his hands up in the air. But then in that first half, I was trying to quell the panic demons in my poor little addled brain, because after that field goal drive, the Texans went 3 and out, had a bunch of procedural penalties, covering up the tight end. CJ Stroud threw an egregiously past the line of scrimmage pass attempt, and then a one-play interception before the Colts would score a touchdown. And then ultimately they got on a nice drive there, and it had a big play by Woody Marks, big play to Nico Collins on a cover 0 blitz. CJ did a good job of recognizing blitz, getting the ball out immediately when he had unblocked defenders coming on either side of him. And then there was a little bit of ingenuity in the play calling by Nick Caley down in the end zone a couple of times, but on that drive as well, they got Nick Chubb in with a really nice and impressive run with some good lead blocking by Cade Stover and Ariante Ursary. That was a nice drive after a really modeled beginning and some, I don't want to say, well, it was an ugly interception. There's no way to paint that differently than a really ugly interception by CJ Stroud. The one, I guess, silver lining or the good part, the best part, one old guy I used to know said sometimes it's like trying to hold a turd by the good end when you take a really bad thing and try to find the best of it. That interception at least was just a simple bad throw, more so than it was a bad read. He's trying to squeeze it in between the safety and the cornerback. And if he had thrown it accurately, it was a safe throw. It was either going to be a reception or an incompletion and nothing more. It was not a good throw, but he got into a groove, and I thought the offense in the second half did a really good job of sustaining drives. Really, we'll get to the failed fourth and 1 attempt with the Cade Stover tush push. But even that drive was a good, productive drive. When you've got a really good defense like the Texans do, who are now, yet again, we'll put the rankings up here, the number 1 scoring defense at 16.5 points per game. Rams are at 17.5 points per game. Thank you, Bryce Young. And the Seattle Seahawks behind them at 18.1. The Denver Broncos 18.2, and Green Bay Packers at 18.8. But the Texans with a healthy 1 point per game margin over the second place Rams. Not that that's the only thing that matters, but on this team it kind of is, because until the offense can routinely score a good chunk more than 20 points, the defense needs to continue to perform the way it has. Here's CJ on how the team has seemingly figured out a way to win all of these one-score games that early in the season they were dropping week by week by week.
Yeah, I think winning on third down, being better on first and second down, and then, scoring touchdowns in the red zone is, that's really just the key to victory every week. If we want to win games, that's what we got to do. If we look back at some of those games, we were on the goal line in the red zone and not scoring touchdowns and settling for field goals. So that's something that we just had to change, and I thought we've been able to do that the last couple of weeks. I thought when Davis came in, he did a really good job at that. I thought the play calling, with the play and the routes we're doing has been great. Like we had the one today, guy knocked it down, but like Dalton wide open. You know what I'm saying? So things like that will start, to come more and more evident. As we be able to run the ball down there and be able to score touchdowns in the red zone is really key.
Yeah, it's scoring touchdowns. That's the one thing that eludes this offense so far. The minor little detail, and they've made progress. They're still the 31st ranked red zone offense when it comes to scoring touchdowns in per trips to the red zone. Only the lowly New Orleans Saints are below the Texans right now. So if they could, they're not going to get anywhere past the midpoint, and that's even if they just start just tearing the cover off the ball. However that works in football compared to baseball, that they need to do a better job of it. I thought that there's elements of physicality on the offensive line that have really started to improve. And what you're seeing in the run game is that they're not having incredible runs all that regularly. Woody Marks and Nick Chubb are doing an increasingly better job, I think. But the success rate, the percentage of the time, they calculate success rate by what percentage on any given down you make towards a first down. So like on first down, if you run for 4 yards, it's a successful run. On second down, if you get to like 60% of however much it takes to get to a first down, that's a successful run, and et cetera. And they've done a better job of that compared to last year, where Joe Mixon would have some nice explosive runs, but we came out of so many games last year where you'd say, well, Joe Mixon had 137 yards rushing, but they actually ran the ball horribly because most of the time Joe Mixon was getting tackled in the backfield, but he broke off a couple of long runs. It's been more consistent. They've been able to sustain drives better. But if you look at the total yardage for the Texans, they're somewhere around the middle of the pack right now. And yet they're dead last in scoring, or second to dead last in red zone touchdowns, and that's kind of where they need to pick up that slack and do what they're doing between the 20s. Once they get past the 20s, they're making some progress. Here is Demeco on his biggest takeaways from the game.
My biggest takeaway is always I'm excited that we got the win, but I think the biggest takeaway for me is we left so much out there, right? And there's still so many things where we can actually, so many things we can do better. And I know it's tough to say that, but it is some small things, some things I know we can do better, things we've worked, things we can clean up technique-wise, fundamental-wise. I just feel like we still left a lot of plays out there, and that's my challenge to our guys. It's always, how do you get better? Don't just rest on, we won and be happy with winning. It's all about continue to learn in a win or a loss. What do you learn from it, and how you keep pushing the envelope to get even better?
Yeah, and I think if you break that down to offense and defense, offensively, obviously there's a bunch of things that they can improve on some of the improvements they've already made. The offensive line, I think, at the beginning of the season was performing like one of the worst offensive lines in the league. Then they steadily got to where I think they were playing like an average offensive line. You look at these last couple of weeks, they've allowed 2 sacks in 2 weeks, and the run game has been, I think, not as consistent, but more dependable than it had been previously. But more than anything, the fundamentals on the offensive line, I'll credit Cole Popovich for this, have gotten a lot better. And a lot of those negative plays that would just kill a drive last year, you're not seeing through a combination of the play calling, but the types of play calls that Nick Caley is making in the run game. They're mixing in some zone run, and when they do it better with better fundamentals. But also just when they're running duo, which is a play where you're just double teaming the defensive tackles up into the lap of the linebacker, it creates for more of a solid wall on the offensive line. And it's one of the things that's contributing to them to just being a little bit more consistent. They need this current configuration that we've seen with Titus Howard at left guard and Trent Brown at right tackle. We're 2 games into this, and I see zero reason to change it other than perhaps Trent Brown's health at some point. I'm not he doesn't project health. He doesn't project like, yeah, this guy is going to be healthy for the rest of the season. And yet so far, he's just a big, massive human being that you can do some things with him in the game that you really couldn't before, especially now that you've got Titus Howard down there at left guard. Defensively, explosive plays. This is the one thing that the Texans have improved on over last year, but you saw some of those huge chunk plays that the Colts were able to make yesterday. Some of them were just incredible throws. The throw on the sideline, that was a beautiful throw. Kamari Lassiter had him pretty well covered, but that was just a beautiful throw. Some of those chunk plays over the middle where guys are wide open, where you're rotating. I mean, Jalen Reed gets injured in that game. This entire season from from CJ Gardner-Johnson to MJ Stewart. CJ Gardner-Johnson, not because of injury, but still gone. MJ Stewart, Jalen Reed, all these guys getting injured. Demeco was asked about that. I don't have that in here. Said they expect Jalen Reed to be back. Didn't show his hand in terms of anybody that they might go out and sign to help out in the interim. No word on Jimmy Ward just yet. Jimmy Ward, I didn't even mention him. So going back to the preseason, when you thought you were going to have Jimmy Ward and MJ Stewart out there as your veteran presence in the secondary, they don't have those guys right now. But to show these explosive plays, I'm going to grade them on a hard curve here because they're a very, very good defense. But if you look, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see this. If you're not watching on YouTube, I'll explain it. But the explosive play rate allowed, it's the column all the way second from the right. If you look at some of the top defense, the Broncos are up there with the second best explosive play rate allowed, 3.9%. You look at the Rams, they've got the fourth best rate. The Chargers are at the fifth best rate. The Seahawks at the seventh best rate. You go down to the Texans, amongst the top defenses, the Texans are one of the worst of the best defenses when it comes to limiting explosive plays. And that's the kind of thing that drives Demeco crazy, I'm sure, because a lot of times that does boil down to either a missed assignment or somebody not quite having the right leverage or, biting on eye candy, something that the Colts are very good at presenting. Kansas City Chiefs are very good as well. By the way, the Texans, yet again, they were an underdog this week, just as they were against the Bills. FanDuel, I think, settled in at Colts favored by 3.5, and that had fluctuated all the way up to 4.5 points at one point. But the Texans take care of business, the Chiefs game is going to be super interesting. Obviously, here's Demeco on the offense's ability to control the game in the second half the way they were yesterday.
I feel like we've moved the ball, really well.
And I should say, control the game is maybe that's a little bit ambitious, but to be able to control clock, certainly. The Texans had a 35-minute time of possession in this game.
And of course, we can still get better in the red zone as finishing with touchdowns, but I think we're moving it well. It always starts there. Whatever you want to do offensively, you got to move the football. I thought we did a good job on first down, mixing in some of our play action passes, running the ball. I thought it was a good mix of plays on first down that gave us the advantage there. We were able to get some explosives on first down, passing the football. And so, you keep pressing forward, you keep trying to get as many yards as possible, get in the red zone, and then that's where, you try to strike and score points.
Yeah, and I would add to the things that Demeco talked about improving on the penalties, obviously. He talks about the success rate on first down there. Some of the drive killers yesterday were penalties, I think at least 2 on first down that were tough penalties to have, and that's a drive killer. So cleaning that up, and I don't know how much just the O-line being in there with a slightly different cadence and everything after 3 weeks of Davis Mills, how much of that is just simply random chance and luck versus, okay, CJ wasn't quite operating everything as efficiently as Davis Mills had been. Davis had a couple instances where it got dicey with the play clock. I think they took a delay of game penalty at least once when Davis was in, if I remember properly. Yesterday, CJ very, very close to taking a delay of game. I don't know if Colts fans feel whether that was legitimately should have been a delay of game or not. I know that they don't feel that Nico Collins was interfered with. This is the thing about that. If you're going to talk about the Nico Collins interference penalty that he drew, where it was a ticky-tack, somebody had grabbed his arm, he fell down. I think maybe did a good job selling it. Are we going to completely forget the previous scoring drive by the Colts where Alec Pierce was interfered with on a football that really, frankly, looked like it might have landed in Missouri or something? I did some kind of hand signal that triggered a bunch of balloons on and I can never do that a second time when I try to do it the first time. But if you're watching on YouTube, you see all the balloons. It was some dicey officiating yesterday. I thought it hurt both teams. The extra point That I am being as objective as possible here. I've been burned enough times by camera angles to know that I can't rely on just the camera angle to say whether that ball was actually 100% inside the uprights or not. And it's weird that the NFL doesn't have some kind of advanced technology in this day and age where you can buy a high definition camera on Amazon on Black Friday for about $29 or so. I feel like the NFL should have cameras on almost every area of the field where a right angle can tell you whether something happened or did not happen. And yet that technology eludes the NFL. So we just have to live with what the football gods decided. That indeed was that was an extra point the Texans made. That, I mean, from the get-go in that game, remember Tremont Smith had that nice return and the referee announced that number 7 was illegally aligned. Number 7, that would be CJ Stroud. I mean, that's how weird and bad and out of sorts those officials were yesterday. Next question was about Woody Marks and his ability to close out the game there at the end when he got that first down that sealed the game, and his playing on his toughness and playing on some kind of foot injury.
The toughness that Woody and exhibits, like he had a ton of carries in college. He's used to carrying the load, but he did an outstanding job of just pushing through. That's what you talk about, the injuries, the getting nicked up in the game, toughing it out, coming back, battling, and wanting the football at the end of the game to close it out. Like, you can't say enough good things about Woody.
Yeah, and Woody Marks, I think, has been the guy that you had high hopes for in the draft. I didn't know or expect him to be as physical as he was, and as for a guy that weighs 205 pounds to routinely be knocking defenders back, to be carrying not just one but 2 or 3 defenders at times for an extra few yards on a pound for pound basis, it's got to be one of the most impressive in the league. If you look at yards after contact, hey, it's great. Joe Mixon gets yardage after contact. It's impressive, but he's also a 225-pound beast. A 205-pound running back doing what Woody Marks does is really, really cool. Nick Chubb, his ability to really push the pile forward. You know, he doesn't have that same open field explosiveness that he used to. I don't know if he ever gets that back, but for what you need him for, to turn a 2-yard gain into a 4-yard gain, that's been really good. This is Demeco on the ability of the offense to pick up blitzes and stunts in games in a way that they previously had not. You guys all remember that.
Credit to the coaches, starting with Kaylee and the offensive staff. They've done a really good job of really emphasizing and walking through the pressure looks that we'll see. And credit to the players. They executed it the right way. I think Woody has stepped up and did a really nice job. You know, in protection, he's improved the protection, how we're communicating up front. We did a really great job, probably one of our better jobs yesterday of picking up the blitzes that they were bringing and kind of got them out of some of those blitzes. And not just picking it up, I thought CJ did a great job of answering some of those blitzes, getting the ball to Nico on one down the field on a deep end cut. So it's collectively, coaches, players, everybody working well at it, but it starts how we practice, how guys are attentive to the details in their meetings and walking through to fix some of the issues that we had earlier with those.
Yeah, and they've done such a better job, especially just on the simple games. Go back to the Jaguars game in week 2, and that was very much, you saw, for one, you had Juice Scruggs there at left guard. You had rookie Ariante Ursary playing in his first game at left tackle. Remember, he had played at right tackle against the Rams. And Ariante Ursary has really turned it on in terms of his football IQ, his understanding of what he needs to do, where he needs to be, and then just his physical ability to handle NFL defensive linemen. He's just night and day what he was during training camp. During training camp, I was still looking at him kind of like a 2-year project. At that point, you figured Cam Robinson was going to be starting in front of him. So Cole Popovich has done a good job with that. As far as Nick Caley goes, I do think that they're doing a better job as the season goes on of marrying some of the runs to some of the passes, and that's why the play action is starting to work. The Nico Collins end around for the touchdown rush that Nico had, really well designed and really well executed. You had Titus Howard at left guard pulling to the right the linebackers got sucked up and bid on run, and there was just enough clutter in the backfield that the guys on the Colts who did make the right read really couldn't get there. There was just too much traffic because of the linebackers who had bit. So that part of it was really good. The wide receivers and the tight ends blocking on those goal line plays and on some of the plays on the perimeter was also really good. Xavier Hutchinson helped spring that 16-yard run back on that first scoring drive that Woody Marks had. All those guys, even the guys that aren't quite physically built for it, like Christian Kirk, have been doing a really good job. And that's something we didn't really see consistently last year. That's definitely gotten a lot better. Cole Popovich and Nick Haley deserve credit for that. I have neglected the defense in this, and like at the very least, let me get a little bit of love to Derek Stingley. Here's Demeco on Derek Stingley's game yesterday.
Stingley's done a great job all year. He's done a great job of, just handling his business, doing it the right way, working hard in practice, showing up in games when it's his opportunity to make plays. He finds a way to make those plays.
So let's bring up this stat from, I think it's the 33rd team. Oh, no, it's NFL Next Gen stats. Games with under 10 yards allowed in coverage. Derek Stingley has 4 of them this year. Quinyon Mitchell also has 4. Then Pat Surtain, A.J. Terrell, and Lenore. Yeah, he pronounces it Lenore. Out there in San Francisco has had 3. Stingley, it's a weird year for Stingley. For one, he was dealing with that oblique injury early on, and he just wasn't moving the way he typically moves, and he overcame that. And since then, the PFF scores have not been kind to him. I do think that a little bit of that is the types of coverages that the Texans are playing. They're playing a lot of match coverage where you start off in zone, and then when you pick up your guy, that it converts into man. So you're playing off. It's not like they're asking Stingley to come up and just play sticky man coverage all the time. In the advanced stat sites and everything, it'll show is just zone coverage, but it's a little bit more complicated than that. And I think it's weird that he doesn't get targeted and teams are staying away from him completely, and yet somehow he's being penalized for that. And I do wonder if sometimes he intentionally gives people a lot of cushion at times because he knows he can reel that back in. He's flat out remaining that shutdown corner that you want, and he's on the number 1 scoring defense in the NFL and the number 1 by yardage allowed. The Chiefs obviously are somebody that you start thinking about your defensive backs with. And right now, the Chiefs are a 3.5-point favorite on FanDuel. I'm going to go back and watch that Colts game from last week because one thing the Colts were doing that was effective until it wasn't in the fourth quarter there, rushing 3 and just dropping 8 into coverage. That's something that the Texans might emulate, but also the Texans aren't afraid, as we saw against Josh Allen with the Bills, to use a spy. In a lot of ways, when you're facing a quarterback who knows how to take that yardage when it's there and available because you drop everybody into coverage or what have you, it's sometimes having that spy, it's almost like having a 5-man pass rush, and he can be up at the line of scrimmage and create one-on-ones, then drop back a little bit, whether it's Azeez Al-Shaair or EJ Speed or whomever else, and then just enter the rush when it's appropriate or stay back there in a loose zone. I think we're going to see a good amount of that, and it'll get interesting between Andy Reid and Matt Burke and Demeco Ryans. I'm really looking forward to this week's game. This is Demeco on his decision to go for it on both 3rd and short and 4th and short with the Cade Stover tush push on what could have been the final drive of the game, but ended up being the penultimate drive for the Texans.
How do you arrive at the decision to go for it on the 4th down in your next to last offensive drive?
Yeah, during that series, we were driving the ball down, felt really good of how we were driving the ball. Honestly, on the first 3rd down, I felt like we got it. I felt we had really good movement, and I told the guys to do it again. Just being aggressive there, that's my call as the head coach. I'm aggressive, so, hey, it didn't work. That happens sometimes, but it's not going to stop me from being aggressive.
Okay, this is, I mean, if anybody had any question whether it was Nick Haley or Demeco Ryans calling the shots in those moments, that's Demeco saying, go for it again. And this is where I like, sometimes it's belief is an awesome thing. Believing in yourself, believing that you're going to have a positive outcome, that's all well and good. But there comes a point where you got to recognize that you're the Chihuahua barking at a German Shepherd. And there's certain advantages and disadvantages that you have in situations like that. The Texans offensive line, Demeco said that they'd gotten push on that first one on the third down attempt. I don't know. It wasn't all that impressive to me, the amount of push that they did get. Plus, they're introducing this play without having done it a whole lot. And everything I've ever read about the Eagles and why they're so good at the tush push, for one, Jalen Hurts can squat 3 times his body weight. 2, they practice the hell out of it. And there is a lot of technique that goes into it above and beyond just having a bunch of bodies pushing up. So the Texans have already established that they're willing to go kamikaze and run 4 times in a row like they did at Denver. And then they've taken advantage of that. Offenses have had to respect the fact that they know the Texans, if they get stuffed, will step up to the line and run the ball up the gut again. And it's worked out with some play action opportunities for touchdowns and first downs. Teams bite on the play action because they know that the Texans are crazy enough to do something they shouldn't be doing. You don't have to keep establishing that. You can have Cade Stover take the snap and then pitch it out. Do something, end around, whatever it might be. Take advantage of the fact that you've already established yourself as a kamikaze type of football team that throws caution and good sense to the wind and just goes for it. You don't have to be crazy all the time. But this is a good win. We'll have more to talk about when we start previewing the Chiefs here in a couple days. It's gonna be a fun week. I'm going to tell you that much, everybody. Thanks for following, liking, subscribing, whatever you do on whichever platform you're on. If you're on Apple, please leave a 5-star review. And thanks to FanDuel for sponsoring the podcast.